Welcome. I'd like to welcome you all to our presentation today, titled A Care Team for Life Transitions. I'm Pamela Mills, and I'm here with Suzanne Scheer, who we will be talking about how to build your best team for care of your loved one in their older adult years. So we have both Suzanne and I will be talking about today the resources that you can gather for yourself and your loved one in order to create the best quality of life possible for an older adult, whether they want to continue to age in place in their home or if they would like to move to a residential community, or just gathering the resources that you need, even if right now neither one of those concerns is on your plate, whereupon you just want to kind of figure out what you need potentially to plan for the future. So we'll be able to actually also share these slides with people later on if you would like to. You can always email me at Pamela, Pamela, at corewoodcare.com, and I can always send these slides to you. So beginning, this is who I am. I'm the Associate Director of Care Management for Corewood Care. We are a care management and home care company located in Bethesda, Maryland, Montgomery County. We serve Montgomery County, Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Frederick County, also in Maryland. We additionally have care managers, home care professional caregivers, and engagement partners. Our engagement partners are people with bachelor's degrees and more who can provide socialization and general personal assistance and support, non-direct care to people who would just like someone to come and help them with a variety of different issues. Consider it like a personal assistant for your older adult years. So those are the three service lines that Corewood Care does provide. I personally have been working in services with older adults since I was actually 13 years old. That's kind of a long time. It seems like, at least now at this age. When I say like I've been in this field for 40 years, that makes me feel like I should look a lot older. But I just look fabulous. There you go, right?
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
but it's just that I started really young. So I primarily have been working in memory care and working with people with cognitive impairment or cognitive change. And I'll talk potentially a little bit about what those two differences are. But if you are interested in learning more about that, I'm actually right now hosting a weekly care partner education series focusing on gathering education and resources for people who are living with either cognitive decline or cognitive change. So that's a little bit about me. When I'm not at work, I love to spend time with my animals at home. I have a lot of household animal companions, including backyard chickens. So if you have a backyard chicken, you can ask me about that as well. But I also love to kayak and do photography. So that's about me. And Suzanne, you want to introduce yourself?
Of course. Yes. Hi, Pamela. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Suzanne Scheer, and I'm a financial advisor, and I specialize in long-term care insurance. I started my career as a family law attorney, and that was sidelined caring for family between my son being born and then my parents having really long illnesses. So I had a very long career break where I was overseeing my parents' care. My dad had long-term care insurance, but my mom wasn't able to get it. And I witnessed firsthand at a very young age how that was helpful having it and those problems that we faced not having any and the concerns of running out of money, which are really common. And so now that I've pivoted to becoming a financial advisor, I've decided to really focus my attention on helping people with long-term care planning, helping them understand if they have a policy, how it works, or if they're looking for policies, all the different options that are out there, and I'll try to contain myself because I start talking about it and it's hard to stop because I get excited about it because I love it so much. But I can't stress enough the importance of at least looking into what options exist because there used to be just basically one option and now there's so many more and there are so many different funding options and people have not heard of all these different options. And so it's kind of fun to share these little bits of information that no one's ever heard of before. So as a teaser, there, if you stay tuned, there'll be some interesting ways of funding that you might not have ever thought of or never heard of. So I'm happy to be able to share that with everyone.
All right, thank you. So let's begin by I like to start off with this slide because not only is it one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite existential philosophers, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and writers, if you like classic literature, but he talked about how life is a journey and not a destination. And it is honestly, when you think about it in the wisdom of life, it really is true because it seems like whenever we feel like we have landed at one particular place, we're again kind of looking towards somewhere else. It's like, we talk about the small goals in life. Oh, I want such and such for myself. I want a new house. And then you get to the new house and it's like, oh, well, it needs a little bit extra decoration. Or wouldn't it be nice to have an additional vacation home? Or wouldn't it be nice it's like we never seem to settle in life. That's just kind of like the human condition. And so we are always looking to move forward. We are always looking to continue to grow as human beings. And so you see that both personally, spiritually, metaphysically, just all of us, are looking to continue to move forward. And so, yes, life is a journey, and we are constantly moving forward and planning for that journey, being able to see, what might be on the horizon is an essential part of well-being, for all of us, and being able to navigate that successfully. So today, that's what we're going to be talking about is navigating towards that, well-being more successfully to those older adult years as successfully as possible. And, we're here as professionals in the aging services field to help you accomplish that.
So Pamela, one second. I can't see your slides, so I think I might have paused screen sharing. So can you see on your end if you're
Oh,
able to unpause
oh,
that?
oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it says somehow it paused. I don't know why. Okay. Oh,
There we go. Okay,
let's do
wonderful.
this. Technology is
Hmm.
lovely. Okay, so there's me. Okay.
Okay.
Um, can you see Joe?
Yes.
Okay. So Joe is our imaginary guy that we're going to be using as an example for this presentation. So I created Joe. So if he happens to look like somebody that it's really just a coincidence. But this Joe is created from Google Images. What's just that? Not AI, but Google Images. And this Joe, I'm imagining, he kind of meets the overall average of what people in their older years might be experiencing. He's 85 years old. He's had a lot of adventures in life. He has had a satisfying career. He's now retired. He's done raising his family and he just wants to enjoy his independence. He's as part of enjoying that independence, he's accustomed to, doing life on his terms, which essentially we all should. We should all feel, comfortable making our own decisions as we are capable and continuing further in life with, what we want to experience in our older adult years. We want to continue to feel purposeful. We want to continue to feel that, life is, a valuable experience and worth living every step of the way. So, Joe here, he's an adventurer. He enjoys spending time with his family. He reads, he volunteers, and he just finished taking a cruise to Alaska, something that I would love to do one day. So he loves his house, and unfortunately, his house is multiple levels, which means that he has to navigate the stairs, and that is not always easy as we're getting older. Going up and down stairs. doing house maintenance, climbing on ladders, changing out light bulbs, fixing things, all of these tasks sometimes become more challenging as we get older. So we want to continue to thrive, and Joe wanted to continue to thrive. So, he's looking at ways that, he can age in place, even though he has four sets of stairs, and that can be extremely challenging, in his own home. He enjoys culture and social connections in his neighborhood, but he realized that many of his friends and neighbors, they stopped driving. So it's harder for them to see each other. Um, he also, values his independence, he values his autonomy, and he wants the lifestyle that he prefers, while also he's looking for ways, to have that lifestyle and also remain safe, if his physical abilities change. So let's talk about, some of the concerns that we have with, aging in place. You know, some people are determined not to ever leave, their family home or maybe the home that they've lived in the most part of their adult lives. And probably the family home is not the home that the person was born into, but usually the home that was acquired after they got married, and the home that they raised their children in, or perhaps even if they moved after their children were grown, it's the home that they and their loved one decided to retire into. So it usually is a single family home or a condominium, where the older adult is currently living in the community. So that's what I've defined as the family home for this purpose of this presentation. And what I have found as a care manager is that many of these family homes are just not designed for an older adult to live the remainder of their lives. And yes, they're made with usually multiple levels with stairs. In fact, one of the things that I refer to in Washington, D.C. here in Capitol Hill is I often call those Capitol Hill homes Escher homes. Because if you remember that artist Usher who had the stairs within the picture with the stairs within stairs within stairs within stairs. And I see that a lot when I go to as a care manager to kind of do a home safety assessment of people's homes. I see multiple levels of stairs in this particular area where we're living in. And those stairwells are also tend to be very narrow, which means that if you are going to install a stair chair, which is a device that can help a person who's sitting down or with limited mobility to move up those stairs, even stair chairs are potentially unable to be installed in these types of locations. So when we look at the family home, we want to make sure that, is it safe? Is it are the bathrooms large enough? Are the stairwells large enough to age in place safely and successfully? We ask questions as care managers. Who's doing the laundry? Who's changing the light bulbs? Who's mowing the lawn? Who's caring for the pets? I have a lot of pets myself, I shared earlier. And I tell you, as you get older, it's not as easy to get down on the floor and change out that litter box, or to, walk the dog around the neighborhood, or to even, maybe let the dog, outside in the backyard. These are all, small tasks that when we're younger, we don't even think about because it's like we're just going to do it. But as our bodies change, these smaller tasks can sometimes become much more challenging. Um, we also need to think about, are professional caregivers always welcome? I mean, sometimes having new people or different people in the home is uncomfortable for older adults. And we have home care services, here at Corewood, and that is a common theme, helping people feel comfortable with new people in the home. Think about it. If you're accepting professional caregiving services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, you're not going to be able to have the same professional caregiver every single one of those days. So on average, we need three or more professional caregivers to do a 24-hour shift. For an individual, and it usually is, 3 to 6 caregivers, because you need days off. Full-time hours, are, less than usually around 36 hours a week, so when you have the expense of overtime, when you have the expense of having more people for longer hours, that's not always wanted, and people would want to have, people that they can trust, that they can always have each day. And honestly, it's just not attainable to have the same person all the time. So it's important to know that you're going to have multiple people coming into your home to complete these jobs. And the person has to feel comfortable with multiple people coming into their home, which is not always easy. So, like I said, aging in place typically requires a one-level floor plan, an accessible bathroom on the main level. And that, again, is not always the case. A lot of times on the main level in typical single-family homes is you have only a powder room, so it's only a sink and a toilet. Well, if a person can't go up the stairs, we have to ask, if they're going to be on their main level, how are they going to shower? How are they going to bathe? And that is, again, like a significant concern for aging in place, is you want to have not only have accessibility to a shower, but that shower has to be big enough for potentially a wheelchair to be able to move into that doorway, and then have enough turning radius so that the person can sit on the toilet comfortably or transfer into the shower. So there are a lot of concerns with aging in place in a single family home, that a care manager really needs to think about, that we might not have thought about on a day-to-day basis because we've just never had to. Another concern is that, where are the meals going to be made, and how frequently are the meals going to be given to the person if that person cannot access their own kitchen or can no longer cook their own meals. So bringing in a professional caregiver and bringing in ways to shop for food, to ease the grocery shopping, to then cook the food. These are all concerns that a care manager can assist you with. Also, in your own home, you might not be able to access the outside as much as you did before, potentially, because, like we talked about with Joe, that he stopped driving. And maybe he doesn't have people that can help him come to his home and get onto either a shuttle, like a Metro Access shuttle, or navigate a taxi service. So all of these things are more challenging. So you're going to get incidences where people leave their home less and less. So then you have the potential for loneliness and isolation, which of course can then lead to a greater decline in depression. So who are you going to call? Especially during emergencies. We see more these days how people have family members that are living out of state or even out of the country. So then, who am I going to call in case of a crisis outside of course, 911? When there's a medical emergency, the first people you should always call is 911. But after that, who's going to help you when you're in the hospital? Who's going to make sure that the doctors and the medical team know what your wishes are if you have an advance directive? Who's going to, be there to talk to the doctors in case you're potentially unconscious or unable to advocate on your own behalf? Who's going to help you get resources back to your home when you're ready to discharge from a hospital or a skilled nursing community? These are all questions that the care manager will ask and find ways to assist you. Now, also, care managers typically are on demand and are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, because we can respond to these crises with the knowledge and with the advocacy that a person will need during a hospitalization or an injury or an illness at home or an outpatient surgery. This is very much what care managers do on a day-to-day basis. So let's talk a little bit about independent or what's called instrumental activities of daily living, which help a person maintain their independence. So instrumental activities of daily living are those activities of daily living that we do to maintain our independence, such as preparing our health meals for ourselves, grocery shopping, navigating transportation, driving, paying our bills, performing that household maintenance, like changing those light bulbs or cleaning our homes. These are all called instrumental activities of daily living. And we measure these to see how a person is capable of maintaining their independence as they get older. The other type of ADL, or activity of daily living, is what is commonly referred to as the activities of daily living for caring for one's body physically, such as personal hygiene, dressing oneself, actually eating by putting food in our mouth and successfully swallowing it without any issues of aspiration, drinking, standing up, walking, and using a toilet. When you are working with a long-term care insurance company, which Suzanne will talk more about later, this is actually one of the main measuring points for determining if a person is able to get claimed through their long-term care insurance company. Is the long-term care insurance company will require that a nurse come and assess a person to ensure that they are meeting the qualifications for that claim, which usually require needing direct assistance with two or more of these activities of daily living, not the instrumental activities of daily living as much the activities of daily living, meaning that you need a person to physically help you get dressed, to physically help you eat and drink, to physically help you stand up from a chair and walk and or use the toilet. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So some questions that you might ask when you're trying to figure out what the key indicators of needing help are, is the person able to cook for themselves in the instrumental activities of daily living, but maybe they didn't like to cook at all previously. So if they didn't like to cook previously, we're not going to count against their not liking or not being capable of cooking now. So the care manager very much looks at the person's history and whether the history lines up with the current abilities. So again, that's where having somebody to ask these pivotal questions to make these determinations, like a care manager, is very helpful. So again, back to the journey. So as a family caregiver, there's a lot of things that we might not know what to do because we've never had to do these tasks before, such as consulting physicians, going to a doctor with somebody and asking questions to the doctor. Sometimes it's not easy to do because, for example, if you're, an adult child and you're, have a job, and a full-time job, and then your own family, maybe smaller children, younger children in your own home, need assistance too. There just seems to be a lot to do at the same time. So I might not be able to go to my parents, doctor's visits with them and advocate for them on their behalf. And that's why, having a care manager could be really helpful because then somebody can go in and do that for you as a family caregiver. Also, you're going to want to find out, how do we do these tasks? What kind of questions would I ask the doctor, even if I was able to go to the appointment? How do I know that the type of care that my parents need is exactly what, they are receiving, or what even they can find someone to provide for them? Who's going to manage that care? How do I know that they actually need the help? Because maybe, I call my parents on the phone and they say, oh, well, I'm fine. I'm really okay. Everything's great. And then you come and you visit, and it looks like there's expired food in the fridge, or the home is much more cluttered than you know is typical for your parents. So knowing these things and seeing these changes can be hard to navigate, especially as an adult child. So understanding, how challenging these types of situations are is important if you are being asked to caregive yeah, for a loved one. We all have a lot going on in our lives. It's very stressful to be asked to do more and more things on a daily basis, to be at our work and have the demands that our work lives do require, to have the demands that our caring for young children does require, to feeling like we just have time for ourselves to de-stress and relax. If we're going to add more and more tasks onto a person's plate, it becomes overwhelming, depressing, fatiguing, and we just honestly can't be a person that does anything and everything all of the time. So it's important to note that, as older adults, are, getting older and are needing to rely on more people, that needing to be relied on from the family caregiver can just seem more stressful and more fatiguing. And then we feel guilty if we are pulled into a variety of different directions at the same time. How do I say yes to everybody who needs me in my life? It really is challenging. And then when we're becoming more stressed, in general as human beings, we have a breaking point, and it's important to know, that how being overburdened and overstressed and overly anxious can really kind of affect our caregiving duties, where we don't realize we're being maybe reactive to people who are asking for help in our life, or we're maybe yelling at somebody when we're just stressed and we don't realize that we're yelling at them. And so being able to know when to take a break is an essential part of caregiving as well. So here are some signs of caregiver burden. So if you find yourself feeling any of these ways, it's important to know to take a break or to bring in somebody else that can help you. So when you find yourself with overwhelming fatigue, you're having difficulty sleeping, you're having challenges, with your own mood swings, lack of concentration, you're having time, maybe your own health problems, or you're feeling helpless or hopeless, that is a significant concern. And, finding ways for you to get help is essential. So, who can be on your care team? A care team is made up of a large amount of people, professionals, and also people who are just resources in your community. So, this is kind of like a short list of some of the people that might be part of the care team that you're putting together, to support your loved one. So it could be your local pharmacy, your neighbors, your friends, a social worker, a care manager, like myself, money manager, financial planner, rehab team. There's just so many people that can contribute or help contribute to the well-being of older adults for a family member. So, we got to think about when we're asking for help, how it's important to ask for help, because sometimes people just feel reluctant, to ask for help, and they're thinking that, like, I have to do this myself. Mom and dad were there for me when I was little, and so I need to be there for them now. Or perhaps you're a spouse of your loved one who is needing help, and it's like, oh, well, I promised, that I would, be there for them when we were getting married, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer. I think about, all of that I promised. So I have to be there for them. I have to do it for them. But here's the thing, you're not a professional your loved one. And so you might not have the skill set that a professional caregiver might have, like a care manager, like a physician, like a nurse. You know, professionals are professionals for a reason. Um, I often talk about, my other presentations that, we don't do our own surgery and we don't do our own dental care. Yeah, we turn to professionals who can do that for us. I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, I have a cavity. I have to fix it myself. That would be kind of silly. But it's the same thing with caring for your loved one. There are professionals that are out there who know how to look for the right things and ask the right questions and get the services that each person needs, because we honestly we're just not skilled in doing every job out there ourselves. And also we need to take care of ourselves. Think about when you're on an airplane and they say when the oxygen mask falls down, put it on yourself first before you put it on the person next to you. Or there's a metaphor that you can't pour from an empty cup. All of these things are there, they're out there for a reason, because it's true that we truly cannot care for another person when we are without tools ourselves and we're without health and well-being ourselves.
Can I just throw something in real quick while we're on that topic?
Absolutely.
Um, I just find it so ironic. There's something like 53 million unpaid caregivers, mostly family caregivers in this country. And the recurring theme, which I can attest to, and you probably can attest to from your experiences, Pamela, but every one of them says they feel alone. But there are 53 million,
Yeah.
so it's hard to even wrap your head around that number, first of all. And second of all, when you're in it and your head's down, it's hard to know that you're not the only person in the world going through it. But there are so many great resources like you, like all these different folks who can provide mental health mental health support, helping with exercise, helping with all different meditation, mindfulness, just so many different professionals that are out there to help now that I don't, maybe they were there when I was going through it with my parents, but I think it wasn't as openly discussed. And I don't think there were as many resources as there are now. And so I would urge people, if you're going through this, number one, to know that you're not alone. Number two, seek out someone like you, Pamela, someone, who can help with bill paying, who can help with understanding the finances, understanding the different things, instead of thinking that you have to do everything yourself, because you will burn out.
hmm hmm And it's true, we don't have access to everything all the time, to all the knowledge all the time. And I think about when I was caregiving for my father, my dad he was a tax attorney and a CPA. So he was like number one with his finances like all the time. He knew exactly what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. And when his cognitive change started to occur, as his daughter, I was like, "Hey, Dad, so is everything going good with the bills? And is everything being paid on time?" He's like, "Yeah, I got it. I'm good." He's like, "Don't worry about it." And then I'd go and I'd visit, and I would, kind of feel like a little kid, like who's doing something wrong. I'm like sneaking into his files to see if the electric bill was paid, or if the checks were making sense. And sure enough, there were times that things were not being done correctly. And then I had to step in, and it really kind of felt really awkward for me, as his daughter
Yes.
who knew he was a financial genius his entire life. And now, because of how his brain was changing, he just wasn't able to do that as before. But
Mhm.
I wouldn't know to like look for those things if I was not a care manager. Like I didn't know to like
Right.
to be like, because my dad would just say to me, like, "Oh yeah, no, everything's fine. Everything's good. Everything's being paid. It's great. Don't worry about me. I'm good." And then it's like when even after things I knew were not going well,
Right.
I was just like,
Right.
okay, you say that it's okay, but it's actually not. So, so we need somebody to, I need to step up. We need, you made me your power of attorney for a reason. I think now's the time for me to step in.
Yes.
But yeah, those conversations can be really awkward. And honestly, you
Hmm.
don't know like where to go and who to talk to and, who to ask for help. And it does kind of make you feel like you're struggling. and you all are alone because these are not typical conversations that we have with our
Right.
friends,
Right.
on a day-to-day basis. They're like, yeah,
Mhm.
so hey, do you help your parents out? I was just wondering. It's not something
Right.
that comes up in average conversation.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so let's talk about,
Okay.
Joe again, our imaginary guy. And, Joe recently went to the doctor and he honestly told the doctor that, he feels like he's not remembering, giving himself his diabetes medicine and he's finding himself struggle around his bills a little bit. He actually did find himself, able to open up to his doctor, which is great. But now that we see that these things are happening, that they are concerns, how are we going to get him help? So, Joe's doctor, shared his concerns and said, hey, yeah, you do need to take your diabetes medicine on time because you're going to have medical complications if you don't. And if, of course, if you feel like you're struggling with your bills, there are people that you can talk to help you with that. Daily money managers or bookkeepers that you can hire. And you know what? I'm going to refer you to this wonderful care management agency that I know about, who can, come in and help you with these questions. So it's really important to talk to your doctor when you're feeling like there are things that are not working well for you. So let's talk a little bit about assisted living. So assisted living is, the balance of freedom and care because yes, it is moving out of, the family home or the residential home that you're most familiar with. But here's the thing, it also is moving into a community where resources are available to a person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So that's really essential to have a place that is able to provide you with the resources that you need. If, for example, living in that family home is just not successful anymore or is not safe. So, just to give you a brief overview of what an assisted living community provides, it is an apartment with a kitchenette, a microwave, or a mini fridge, or a larger fridge, depends on the community. You're going to have restaurant style meals 3 days, 3 times a day with snacks. The community is going to provide for you oversight of your medication. They're going to do all of your medication administration for you, so you don't have to worry about it. The community is also going to provide housekeeping services, socialization services, nurse oversight, physician oversight. You're always going to have somebody available to you when you need it. It's not going to be one-to-one care, but it is going to be somebody that is there in that building who can respond to you in case of your needs. And along with your determined needs after you have that assessment with the assisted living community. Of course, change is not easy. And I try to let people know that as a care manager, when it does come time that we make these decisions to move to group communities, because I think about myself, when I was a teen and I had to go off to college. That was not an easy transition. It's just like I was used to being at home, with my friends, with the people who I saw all the time, with the resources that I was most familiar with. And it is a very similar type of transition moving to a community. It's kind of like going off to college again, because you're in a whole new environment with a whole new people, living in a new place. And it's you're going to get a little homesick. You're going to have some difficulty transitioning potentially in the very beginning. But hopefully, as time moves on and you see that where you've chosen to move to is a place that's great and able to provide for you everything that you feel like you need for yourself, you're able to adjust and feeling like that place is, your new home and it feels comfortable. But understand that all transitions, every single transition, takes time. And we've seen that throughout our life. So when you're having a conversation with a person who needs to kind of make this transition, because we've determined for whatever reason that living at home is just not a safe experience anymore, we always want to have these conversations by listening and offering a reassurance and helping the person know that you are there to support them while also helping them feel that you are a safe person to confide in and talk to, and that you're going to be there and listen to their challenges, their concerns, their questions. Don't guilt your loved one. Don't give them ultimatums. Don't be like, you need to move to this community or I'm never going to visit you again. You know, saying things like that will not help your relationship. I can promise you that. So you always want to just sit and be gentle with these conversations. Start early, start bringing the person on many tours of these communities so that they feel that they can look at multiple options. Try to keep the options to around three or four, not really more than that, because then it becomes overwhelming to make different choices. I usually recommend as a care manager knowing what your budget is first and foremost, so essentially what you're going to be able to afford every month in a community, because there are different levels of communities and different costs for communities. Each one is a little bit different with what packages they have and for room and board and medication assistant administration, incontinence care, levels of care. So kind of knowing what your ballpark budget is essential. And then you can really kind of begin from that to kind of weed down, what your choices are, in the area. Now, of course, if you have an unlimited budget, of course you can, go to pretty much any community. But what you really want to do is you at least want a starting point. Like, what can I afford? And then where do I start in my immediate area that will help me make a better decision to select a community, and then go and tour the community, talk to the sales staff, um, ask many, many questions, visit multiple times, maybe on a weekend as well as on a holiday, as well as during the week, so that you can get a feel for what that community feels like all the time. And also understand that, life is unpredictable. So, you didn't promise, to be there to support your loved one 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every single day of the year. That's really just not possible. Like I said, we don't do our own dental care. We don't do our own surgery, and you can't make promises such as, you're going to promise that a person might never have to move out of their own family home, because that might not be a promise that you can keep. So, be aware that people's needs change, and a family home is not always the safest or best place to age in place, especially if, a person can't use the bathroom anymore, or can't navigate their stairs, or can't, change their own, light bulbs, or, just being in the home is just more and more of a risk for their own personal safety. So knowing when to move and how to have that conversation with your loved one is essential. So, the person who is going to move, again, like we said, change is not always easy. So listening to that person is important. There's going to be frustration. There might be some denial, like I talked about, in my relationship with my own father, where he was telling me everything was working great and everything was fine. And I felt like I had to kind of sneak behind his back to check to make sure it actually was, and then found out later on it wasn't. So I had to step up. And those were very awkward and honestly some difficult conversations, because he was saying one thing and I was seeing another. And I had to feel confident to say, what, I really think you need more help than you might realize right now, and I'm here to help you, which is great. So there's going to be reluctance, there's going to be anxiety, probably on both ends of the spectrum for both people having those conversations. And it's going to be a challenging conversation. You also don't want to use words like facility or nursing home because those are kind of old language, and a lot of times older generations, these days when they think of a nursing home or when they think of a facility, they think about the place that their grandmother lived in when they were little. And communities have changed significantly, not just over those years, but even over the years that I've been working in this field. When I started out when I was young, working in communities were very different. And I'm very glad that now so many more communities are, they're beautiful. They look like hotels. Some of them look like cruise ships. I mean, they're just really gorgeous. The rooms are large. The suites are beautiful. The furniture is high end. It's comfortable. It's the kitchens are the food is phenomenal. There's just so much that has changed over the years. So when we're using words like facility and nursing home, it really kind of demeans what current communities are able to provide these days.
Ask a question, Pamela.
Yes, go ahead, Suzanne.
So when families are struggling with having this conversation with a loved one, is that something that you can help with, or how does that usually go?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're kind of like your coach for those conversations as a care manager. The loved one can feel free to confide in the care manager and ask their questions, and then even sit down and have a kind of an intervention, so to speak, with
Uh-huh.
their care manager as an objective party, because maybe they feel like when they're having these conversations with for example, as an adult child, when you're having this conversation with your parent, the parent is just kind of pushing back and they feel like that they're really not going anywhere. One thing that I have felt is that, when your care manager becomes part of that conversation, the older adult parent kind of has a tendency to listen more because I'm wearing my professional hat, or when you have a different person in the dynamic, some more social niceties are kind of being put on because they don't want to talk how they would privately to their child in front of someone else.
Uh-huh.
So they're going to maybe listen a little bit more or be more kind of open and reflective of what the care manager might say as a professional, versus how they would be with just their daughter or their son.
Got it. Good. Yeah,
And I
that's a
actually had
good
that with my
buffer.
own parents as well. I remember there were some times where I was on the phone with my mom and she'd be telling me about the things that she heard from other people, which are the exact same things that I had told her. And she
Oh.
would be like, "Oh, you're not going to believe what I heard from my neighbor about there are people out there that can be professional caregivers that can come to your home." I'm like, "Really, Mom? That's amazing." Because I feel like we've talked about this before multiple times. It's like, but she heard it from the neighbor, and it was just like, "Oh, I never knew."
Right.
Just
It's kind of
like,
like with a parent with teenagers, same thing. Like I've been
yeah,
through that so many times where it's like you just have to bite your tongue and be like, "Oh yeah, they do have a great idea, don't they?"
that's a great idea, Mom. I feel like I've never shared that with you 1,000 times before. But anyway,
So funny.
and so we understand as care managers how these conversations can be
Uh-huh.
challenging. So, continuing the journey, we have to understand that, sometimes depending on the situation, people can continue to decline, over their lifetime, and people will continue to decline over their lifetime. That's just what being humans about, so people are going to need, help with their activities of daily living. They are going to need, help with making some very difficult decisions. And so as people age and people's abilities change over time, maybe assisted living might not be the best fit even for that person for the rest of their life. Maybe there are going to be different needs for people living with cognitive impairment where a standalone assisted living might not be able to provide the resources that they need, and the person might need to move to a memory care or a long-term care community. And of course, this is all on a case-by-case basis. It's not the same for every single person, but knowing what the right location is, the right type of residential setting that is available for a person is part of, again, that care manager knowledge. Okay, so what is memory care? Memory care is a specific residential setting for a person who has a cognitive decline, such as Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, or another type of cognitive impairment that is directly impeding their safety. And so memory care, some memory cares operate under assisted living licenses, and so you kind of get the best of both worlds. But then there are more like independent living types of assisted living communities that don't have as much of a ability to provide services for somebody in that setting for or who is living with a memory impairment. So like I said, every community is different. But if you're looking at the definition of a memory care, what you're looking at is a specialized community setting for people who are explicitly living with memory care diagnoses. And there, not only do you have that 24-hour supervision like you have in assisted living or another type of location, but it's usually a secure setting to help a person who might be experiencing wandering or might leave and not be safe without having that direct supervision. So that's kind of really what memory care is about. And it's also a higher level of oversight. You're going to have more professional caregivers accessible to a person who's living in memory care than what you might typically have with a standalone assisted living. So understand, that, all of us are working together. You are doing the best that you can to support your loved one. The community that maybe a person is living in is, of course, always trying to do their very best by the persons who live there. We're all, in this together. So what we want to do, as a team of care partners, is we want to use empathy and understanding and coordinate each of our perspectives. I'm gonna, as a care manager, I'm gonna sit down and talk with the family and try to find out what their concerns are. I'm gonna, talk with the physicians. I'm gonna talk with all the other people that are participating in this person's care team to, figure out exactly if we all are working together so that we can thrive in the moment and bring each person directly the resources that they need. So here's just some typical costs of what you might find when it comes to affording care. Professional caregivers, which are often referred to as certified nursing assistants or home health aides, they can cost anywhere between $34 an hour and $47 an hour, and that is very much determined by the agency that you're hiring. Of course, care for a couple is going to cost more than care for an individual. Privately hired caregivers, in addition, are going to have different types of expenses that you're going to need to navigate. If you're hiring them privately, for example, you're going to need to pay their employment tax, and you're probably going to have to pay for different types of liability insurance in your own home to cover cases of accidents happening, in your home. So working with a care manager who knows what some of these costs might be, for example, what a residential community might cost per month. You're in our area, you should expect at least room and board costing, 8,500 a month, all the way up to all inclusive 20,000 a month or more. And then there are going to be increases each year on what those costs are. And so as you can see, caregiving is expensive. Residential communities is expensive. So we need to have the tools, the financial tools accessible to us to be able to afford that care. So now I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne. And if you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out to me at this email, or you can call me direct at 202-750-3880. I really appreciate having the opportunity to share with you today.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
I'm
I'm
going
going
to
to share my
stop my
screen.
slides so Suzanne can
Okay.
jump on with hers.
Okay. Let me share my screen here. Let me share. Hopefully that will work well. Let's see. I did not do that right. Give me one more time. Do that again. Someday I will get down the screen sharing, but it is not my expertise. Give me 1 second to just find what I need here. Here we go. Reasons. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, we're on good shape now, finally. Thank goodness. Um, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about understanding long-term care insurance. And Pamela, thank you so much. That was so helpful. And if I had known, I don't know that there were care managers around when I was going through things with my parents, but I can't even imagine. I mean, if I had had somebody like you to help me through everything, I mean, life would have been completely different. I mean, it was just, I felt like it was all on me and I was running around crazy trying to do everything. And if I had known that there was someone who could help with even one little aspect of it, it could have made a big difference. So I'm really glad to know. And I don't think a lot of people know that care managers exist. So I'm really, really glad that we're shining a light on that because it's wide reaching and your knowledge and your ability to come in and provide the help and share resources. I mean, it's just incredibly valuable. And I will say that not all, but some long-term care insurance policies will reimburse for care coordination or for care manager. So you have to check on that depending on the policy. I mean, like I know of one client with an older policy where it has a certain number of days of service per year with care management. So that's something to think about, that there might be a way to get some of your fee reimbursed, but we'll get into that. So
That's good to
um,
know.
yeah, so long-term care insurance is care that's custodial in nature, so it's not medical care. So people think, oh, well, why would I need long-term care insurance? I've got Medicare or I have health insurance. Well, Medicare doesn't cover this because it's not a medical need. We're talking about like you were talking about, Pamela, ADLs, bathing, dressing, eating, transferring, toileting, and maintaining continence. And so, if you can't do two out of the six of those things, or if you have a severe cognitive impairment, then that would trigger a claim. And that's when you could get somebody in, and it would be someone to help you with these things that are not medical. So it's bringing an aid in, like you were talking about. And you can get it in home care, adult daycare, assisted living, skilled nursing, a lot of different facilities. The older policies, some of them said you could only use it for home care, and some said you could only use it for facility care. But more recently, the policies are now comprehensive. So if you get a newer policy, it's going to cover anything. And it interestingly has a provision for alternative methods of care. So I guess that would apply, in the future if robots get involved with care, or
Not sure
if
if I'm a big fan of robot care, but
I'm
who
not
knows?
either, but they do have a provision that lets you, if there should be, I don't know what it would be, but if there are some other types of care that should become the norm going forward, a lot of the policies now have a provision that just allows that, since we don't know what's going to be in the future. Right. We don't know what's gonna look like. So there
True.
is some, leeway in the contracts for that, should that come to pass. Because I think, I don't know 100% of the history, but I believe assisted living was not always at play. And so, in the days of just nursing homes, they might have said, alternative forms of care could include, an assisted living or an adult family home or daycare, adult daycare. So, all these different things that might come about, that a lot of the policies now are giving a little bit of leeway so that can be covered as well. Now, some policies will say that you have to have a licensed caregiver. Typically, the we'll get into this in a second, the traditional plans that have the reimbursement model, they usually say, well, you need to have someone from an agency or someone who's licensed, and then we'll reimburse you for that cost. But there are also some newer kinds of policies, mainly the asset-based plans that are called indemnity. And what that just means is that you can pay whoever you want. You go on claim, you trigger a claim and you qualify, they just send you money. And then you can do whatever you want with that. So there's a lot of flexibility out there with those kinds of things. Um, so long-term care insurance is insurance that covers, part of the cost of care once a claim is triggered. And if you can picture a bucket of dollars, you're deciding, okay, when you get the policy, how much is in your bucket? How long is that money going to last? And what is the interval at which you can take the money out? So how much can you take out each month? So it's just, they might say it's a 5-year benefit, but that only would apply if you take out every dollar of benefit consecutively, then it would last for 5 years. But that doesn't happen. Sometimes, let's say somebody has a $6,000 a month benefit, but they're only using 3,000 in a given month. Then they'd have still 3,000 left in their bucket for that month, and that could extend the length of time that they have the coverage. So they say the years so that you can visualize it, but there's not a lot of people think there's a clock ticking, but there's not a clock ticking. You can go on claim, off claim. There's not a certain time. Like the minute you get a policy, day one, you have a benefit. God forbid you get hit by a bus the day after you get your policy, and you need care, your full benefits available to you then. You could turn it on, use it for a little bit, and then, if it turns out, you recover after a couple months, then you just turn it off and then you save the money for later. And when we're talking about the insurance, in order to trigger a claim, the situation, whether it's an accident or an illness, it needs to be something where it's expected to last at least 90 days. They don't, there's no way to know for sure how long it's going to last in a lot of cases, but it's not intended for someone who, let's say they broke their ankle and they're out of commission for 6 weeks. That wouldn't really be a situation where you would bring in long-term care because it's not expected to last 90 days. But if somebody goes skiing and they break both legs and an arm and they're going to be out of commission for 6 months, then that would be the type of thing where you would put a claim in. And then once you're recovered, then you would turn it off to save the money for another time. So there's a lot of flexibility involved with it. And then a lot of people wonder, I mentioned this a little bit before, does the government pay for long-term care? With folks who are down to about $2,000 to their name, they could apply for Medicaid if they need care, and that would most likely put them in a nursing home in most states. There are a few states that have home care, but for the most part, it's going to be a nursing home for care. And they look at what you've done with your money in the past 5 years. So if somebody has a lot of money and they decide, oh, I want to go on Medicaid, so I'm going to give my money to my daughter or my son or to charity or something. If you do that and they look back 5 years from the time you file the Medicaid application, and if you've given money away that within that 5 years, then they will essentially assess a penalty and will delay how long it will be until you can start getting Medicaid benefits based on how much you've given away. So that's something where you need to consult with an elder law attorney for sure. In the military, there are rare circumstances where they will provide for coverage. Someone had to be in combat, somebody has to be financially qualifying. There are just a lot of different variables. So people think, oh, I was in the military, so I'm going to automatically have long-term care, but it doesn't work that way. It's pretty unusual that someone will actually get the care that way. And then with Medicare, if somebody is hospitalized for at least 3 days, and then they need to go to rehab afterwards, Medicare will pay for the first 20 days 100%. And then after that, if you're progressing, then they would pay part of the next 80 days, but you have a copay. But if during that time you're not progressing with the physical therapy or whatever kind of therapy you need, then they could say, I'm sorry, you're done. And you could be expected to pay for your own cost. So that can get to be pretty pricey for folks who are not progressing with that rehab. So there are two basic kinds of long-term care insurance. There's the traditional, or they call it standalone, and that's what's been around forever. And then there also is asset-based, which also is often referred to as hybrid. Now, when the traditional policies first came out roughly 40 years ago, the actuaries who were developing the product said, oh, well, we don't think that many people are going to actually keep their policies. We think that people are going to let their policies lapse. So they priced them very low. they gave really great benefits, unlimited benefit and 5% compound inflation protection, all these wonderful benefits to people. And so all these people got long-term care policies, and then only about 1% actually let them lapse. So the companies were in trouble because they hadn't planned properly and they need to keep a certain amount of cash reserves available to pay the claims. So that's the reason that folks with older policies keep getting these big increase letters from the insurance companies because they need the money to cover the claims. So if you've got someone who has an older policy and they get a letter from the insurance company saying that it's going to increase, a lot of times what will happen is the people who had the unlimited benefit, the companies are trying to do away with their, they're trying to say, oh, well, your premium's going up by 200%. And if you want to avoid that, you can give up your unlimited benefit and save some money and it'll only be X dollars. And a lot of times people don't know any better and they just say, okay, I'll give up my unlimited benefit. Well, there are other things you can do. When you get those letters, it's really important to call on your financial advisor, call on your agent, call me and say, what other options do we have? Because a lot of times what we'll do is if someone is in their 80s, let's say, and they have inflation protection, which has been helping their policy to grow since they first got it, but they're already in their 80s, they've already accumulated so much, value from the time they first got the policy to today that a lot of times we'll say, well, keep your unlimited benefit, but let's adjust the inflation protection. Let's lower that so that the cost, let's say, I don't know, depending where the person is on their policy, but, let's say they have a pretty decent benefit and they're in their 80s, they could live to 100, but if let's say that if they don't live that much longer beyond the 80s, they don't need it to grow the same way they did when they were in their 30s or 40s. There's not as much time for it to grow. So, it's really important when those letters come in the mail that you talk to someone you trust and get advice with someone who knows how this works because, they want you to give up the unlimited benefit, but that's the worst thing you can do because, God forbid you're in a situation where you do have a long illness, it can make a huge difference. I mean, I've got a client who in his 60s was diagnosed with Parkinson's and he got a policy around year 2000 and his policy provides right now $585 benefit a day, unlimited, and it goes up by 5% compound. So at the end of April, he'll have about $615 a month. I'm sorry, $615 a day for the next year. And then it just keeps going up and up and up and it's unlimited. And, his assisted living is costing him around $15,000 a month. So, and that's, it's so if you have an unlimited benefit policy, please talk to someone before giving that up. Find out other ways you can make adjustments. We'll talk about it in a second, but there are other things you can tinker with besides the unlimited benefit, to lower your premium. So please keep that in mind. So with the traditional plans, the way they work is they're reimbursement. So you incur the expense and then you get reimbursed by the insurance company if you trigger a claim. And almost all the time you're required to, like I said, you're required to hire somebody from an agency or someone who's licensed. So if you have a family member or a friend you want to care for you, or they can't get paid to be your caregiver when you go most of the traditional policies. Another thing with traditional policies is that the premiums are not guaranteed level. So like I was saying before with the increase letters, they can and will probably increase the premiums. So it can be tricky if you've been paying in for all these years and then you get into the point where you're retired and you're on fixed income and then you get this letter saying they're increasing it so much. It can be really problematic where people can't afford it anymore. So that's a downside of the traditional, but a positive about the traditional is that you get a lot of bang for your buck. So you can put in less money and get a lot of dollars for care. So if you don't have a huge amount to spend, or if you don't have a lot of assets to protect, you can look into a traditional policy where you can get some coverage and it will be meaningful coverage and you won't have to put as much money in, but on the flip side, there won't be any cash value or death benefit. So if you need it, if you don't ever need it, then you've paid money in and well, not everyone likes that. They say, well, people are in denial about needing care. Even though 56% of people over 65 are going to need care, everybody says, oh, that's not going to be me, that'll be somebody else. But, if you're actually the person who's needing the care, that's one thing. But if you don't end up needing care and you've paid all this money and all this time, some people don't really like that feeling of, they call it like use it or lose it. And that's not really a good feeling, and people are concerned about paying money for something they might not need. And so because of that, the asset base came along. And what the asset base does, instead of the traditional is just one bucket of money where you decide how much is in there and how much you can take out each month. With the asset base, it's two buckets of money because it's usually a life insurance policy is one bucket, and then the second bucket is an extension of benefits rider, basically. And so you pay money in to the life insurance bucket. If you need care, that money comes out first. And then you go on to the second bucket if you run out of the life insurance bucket. But if you don't use the life insurance bucket, or if you don't use all of it, then that money goes tax-free to your beneficiaries. So the idea that a lot of the money that you put in goes back to your family members appeals much more to people. It's a lot more palatable than knowing that, money is going in, but it may never come back out. So that's a big difference there. And then here's just some of the things like I talked about. We already talked about this mostly with the traditional, how, and the premiums increasing. And then with the asset base, one thing that's really nice is that regardless of how you set that up, the premiums are guaranteed level. So, even if you pay it over time, you could pay it almost like you're paying a traditional, like pay it forever. But if you know that the premiums are locked in, there's a lot of comfort in that for a lot of people. And with this one, this is the one I get excited about, Pamela, because this is the one where you could take things like, sounds like a big word, but there's something called a non-qualified deferred annuity, which basically is it's almost like a CD that you keep rolling over and renewing. So it's not a retirement account, it's a savings vehicle. And a lot of older people had gotten these and they set them up, just basically they put money in and then every year it gets interest. And then you can decide, do you want to take money out or keep it in the account? If you just keep it in, you can keep letting it roll over and you keep deferring the taxes on the interest until you actually take money out. So the best example I have of this is we had a client who had a really old non-qualified deferred annuity and had a balance of about $650,000. And of that $650,000, about $500,000 was gain. So if they took out, when they took money out, $500,000 of it would be taxable at ordinary income rates. So that's a pretty big tax bill. There's a way through the Pension Protection Act, you can exchange that annuity for one that's compliant with the Pension Protection Act. And if you ever need care, money that comes out for care comes out tax-free. So it's a really great idea for someone who, let's say they had that money set aside for when they needed care in this annuity, but they were going to have to pay a lot of tax when they took it out. They can just do an exchange into this other type of annuity. And it's not a taxable event. They just do the exchange from one company to another. And then, they have this ability to use it tax-free for care. And if they don't need it for care, they just would take it out and it would be treated the way it would have been before, which is, the money comes out and it's, pay tax on the gain and go from there. But so that's a really great option for folks up to age 87. And you just have to answer 4 knockout questions. You have to be able to say that you don't have AIDS, you don't need assistive equipment, you don't need help with activities of daily living, and you don't have dementia or another neurological condition. So the person could be kind of unhealthy and 87, but still potentially have this source of funds for paying for care and really get a nice tax advantage. So that one is one of my favorites. So I think that one's really neat. Another one I like a lot is if somebody inherits an IRA from a parent, if it's after January of 2020, they have to take that money out in 10 years. It used to be that when you inherited an IRA from a parent, you could stretch out the benefit over your whole lifetime. But the government wants to get their money faster. So now you have to take it out within 10 years. So there are some plans that let you use that money for, to create a long-term care benefit. And that's something if anyone's interested in that, I'm happy to explain, but it's just a neat way to put that money to work since you're going to have to be taking the money out anyway. So it can create a benefit for yourself and your spouse up to a lifetime benefit. And then if you don't need care, then money that was put in the insurance bucket, part of that policy goes to your beneficiaries tax-free. So it's a really nice way to extend, a legacy since they've taken away being able to stretch out the IRA over your whole life. This is sort of a way to combat that and make it, have the possibility of going on to the next generation. That's a basic on that. And then they're also just on asset based, you can pay all at once, you can pay over 5 years, over 10 years. Um, there's just a lot of different ways you can do it. For someone who's a business owner, if you're a C corporation can deduct all long-term care premiums. I'm sorry, but I just do. I just lost you. Give me 1 second.
I'm here.
Are you still there? Okay, I just
Mhm.
can't see you. I will come back. So yeah, sorry about that. So, yeah, the C corporation, they can deduct all the premiums they pay on a long-term care policy, and then with an S corp or LLC or a sole proprietor, they can take a part based on an age bracketed table. So if you're a business owner, it's definitely something to ask your tax advisor or your financial advisor whether or not a long-term care policy could be an option, for them to get one set up and then get some tax benefits, deduct some of the premiums. Let's see what else I have here. So key things to know when you're designing a long-term care policy is the monthly benefit, which is how much you can take out each month. The length of coverage, like I said, it's expressed usually in years, but there's not a clock that ticks. So that's really just a way to visualize how it works. And then we'd like to put on inflation protection. So you start off with a monthly benefit, let's say like a $6,000 monthly benefit. And then if you add 3% compound, then each year the benefit goes up by 3% compound. So, when you're, going to double about 20 years down the line, it'll be double and you'll have more money available for care. And then the whole bucket grows as well.
Mm.
So, so the other thing I forgot to mention is that if you have an HSA, you can use that with limits to pay for premiums, if that's something that's of interest to some people. Um, so if you're looking at the different types, the traditional long-term care, you put less money out, but the medical underwriting is stricter because you're not putting as much money in. So they're going to look and see if someone's had some health conditions and they are worried the person's going to be likely to need care, then they might not approve them. Whereas asset-based, because you're giving more of your own money, it's, less strict with the underwriting, but you have to put more money out. There's something called partnership protection that comes with traditional plans when you have inflation riders on them. And what that means is that's a way to protect some of your assets should you go on Medicaid. So if somebody has a long-term care policy, a traditional policy with inflation on it, then once they've exhausted all the benefits of their policy, they could apply for Medicaid and shield, let's say their plan paid out $300,000 in benefits. They could shield $300,000 of their assets from having to be spent down and then still qualify for Medicaid. So that's something that's really interesting. The states are trying to encourage people to get long-term care. So that's one of the things that they've put into place as an incentive to say, because they're looking for ways to not have to pay for all these people who haven't planned for their long-term care. And it's a huge burden on the states and the government as well. If anyone has questions, please reach out to me. And here's my contact information is all on here. I'm happy to work with people if you or your parent has a long-term care policy that you got years ago and you don't understand. As a service I don't charge for, I offer to help people, look at their policies. We'll call the insurance company together, find out what they actually have and explain it to them, because for the older policies, they weren't all uniform. And so there's a whole range of coverage and lots of things out there in these older policies. So I can't just say, okay, well, you absolutely have home care and facility care. You might only have one or the other, or you may or may not have inflation protection to make the benefit grow, or I don't know what the length of the elimination period is, which is how long you have to wait to get coverage before it starts. So there are a lot of variables. So if you reach out to me, I'm more than happy to get on the phone with you and the insurance company to find out exactly what you have and how it works. And I would just urge everybody who's listening to, just think about the fact that, should they need care, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be 100 years old and somewhere, totally incapacitated. It could be that you just need help with a few things, but you could otherwise live pretty safely and independently at home, but you just need help maybe in the shower and with dressing, because maybe you're 100 years old and you're a little bit frail and you might be off balance a little bit. So you might just need someone there. It can apply for standby assistance as well as this hands-on assistance. So there are a lot of a lot of scenarios where this could come into play. So I would highly recommend that everybody just, find out about this and what the options are for them. Starting in their 40s really is a good time to look at it because you have to be healthy to qualify. So, you don't want to wait until you're 60 or 70 or 80 and then you have a health issue. And it's like you wouldn't get help, you can't get homeowners insurance if your house is on fire, right? You have to do it beforehand. So it's like likewise, you need to figure out, whether this is an option and whether it's right for you. And please talk with your family members if you have older parents, find out, do they have a policy? Where is it? Who is find out the name of the company, the policy number, what are their wishes? What do they want to do? Where would they want to get care if they needed it? And how would they pay for it? And, those are the kinds of things working with you, Pamela, or working with me or with elder law attorneys, you can facilitate these conversations to try to understand, what somebody wants and how you can do the best possible so that they can achieve that in their older years.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. And that was very
Sure.
valuable presentation.
Oh, thank you.
A lot of great information. I mean, I know my parents had long-term care insurance and my mom was able to use hers, but my dad, died before he was able to use his,
Oh,
and I know like sometimes it just has to do with timing,
right,
but I know there are very useful resources nonetheless.
right. Well, thank
But
you so much for including me in today's conversation, and you provided so much of value too, and so many good resources.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Well, I guess if anybody had any questions, they can reach out to you or I, depending on whatever the question is related to. And I thank everybody for joining us for today. And I'll be stopping the recording, and I could also send this recording to people that would like a review, maybe what we said earlier. All right, take
Yes,
care,
thank
and thanks
you.
for joining us.